A lake is simply a large body of water that's surrounded on all sides by land. The area that the lake fills is called a basin, and how that basin was formed tells you what type of lake it is. Some are incredibly deep rift lakes like Lake Baikal. Others, like the Great Salt Lake, have no outgoing rivers and are even saltier than the ocean. There are pink lakes and artificial lakes, boiling acid lakes, and stunningly blue lakes. Have you ever wondered what causes such a variety of color, shape, and size?
I'm Math Dad.
And I'm Science Mom.
Today, we're going to explore the big, strange, and salty lakes of our world.
Welcome! Today we have a little bit of a shorter lesson learning all about lakes. And if you've ever visited a lake, you'll know that sometimes lakes can be a little unusual.
Well, I actually have a question for you. Behind us, is this a lake?
This is a bay. So if a body of water, if standing water is connected to the ocean, then it's usually called a bay or an inlet. To be a lake, it has to be separated. And if it connects to the ocean, it's going to be by a river, not by the whole entire lake touching the ocean.
So if you came upon a body of water, how would you know if it was the ocean or a lake?
Well, we'll get into that in just a few minutes. But I want to say a quick hello to Julia and Rowan watching in Michigan. Good morning, Nancy and Shyla. Seeing lots of comments in the chat. It's good to see you guys today. And a special welcome to you if you're watching the replay.
Abby from Minnesota says the land of 10,000 lakes.
There are a lot of lakes up north, and those lakes, most of them were caused by glaciers. To have a lake, you have to have an area of land that is lower than the land around it, because otherwise the water's just going to run off and join into a river, right?
That's
or
right.
Head towards the ocean, or maybe even go underground. So a lake has to have a basin. Let's go to the notes. We're going to be on page 100. On page 100 in the notes, we have this little diagram here. One cool thing about lakes is that they really do interact with all of the spheres that we've talked about so far. So we talked about the atmosphere, and in the atmosphere, how much water there is makes a big difference to the weather. And the lake effect is when you have water evaporate from a lake and become humid air, and that humid air can then, if the air blowing over the lake is cold, it makes more clouds. And if you live near a big lake, you'll hear them talk about the lake effect when they talk about the weather, because it makes a big difference to the weather. Lakes also impact the lithosphere, or the geology. And this is really kind of a cool fact. Every single lake that we know of geologically is temporary, because rivers are flowing into the lake and they are bringing in sediment. And just like if you had a bucket of water and gravel mixed together and you were dumping it in a bathtub, eventually your whole bathtub would be filled with rocks, right?
That's true.
Well, unless there is something like a rift valley where you have tectonic plates splitting apart, the lake is going to be filling up with sediment. But it takes a long time for a lake to fill up, sometimes even millions of years, depending on how big the lake is. But these layers of sediment in the bottom of the lake, they can tell scientists a lot about the water flow into the lake and even what type of plants were growing around the lake thousands of years ago, because there'll be pollen and layers of all sorts of biological things in those sediments. And just like a tree ring has sediments that change year after year, the sediment at the bottom of the lake each spring and fall looks different than during the summer and winter. And so you can tell what's happening year to year by looking at that sediment.
Do you think lakes are jealous of the ocean because they're so small and it's so big?
No.
No? Oh.
No. I think
lakes can be beautiful.
Look how happy this lake is.
That's a happy lake. Okay.
And then we're not focusing on the biosphere in this earth science class, but living things really do depend on lakes. And there are a lot of amazing animals that live in just one specific lake in the world. We call those endemic. So let's fill this in real fast. Matt, I'll let you be my pen.
All right.
A lake is really just a large large piece of water, a large body of water. And it needs to be surrounded on all sides by land, except for where a river comes in and where a river goes out. Most lakes will have one or more inlets or rivers going in, but some lakes don't have an outlet. They don't have a river going out. It all depends.
So those travel into the basin. Oh, I was looking for the word inlet. So inlet is the water coming in. Outlet is the water going out.
Yes.
Right.
They travel into a lake fills a basin.
Oh, this one's basin.
Yep. And rivers will often travel all the way to the sea.
Oh, gotcha.
So it can be drained by rivers, which will then go all the way to the ocean. And what type of basin is, how it's formed, that tells you what kind of lake it is. So if it's carved by a glacier, Math Dad, what do you think they call that lake?
Given that there's only one clue left, I'm going to get this right. It's a glacial.
Yeah, a
lake.
Glacial lake. There are rift lakes. There are fluvial lakes formed by rivers eroding a softer piece of rock. There are all different types of lakes. But one of my favorites is rift lakes. And there is an amazing rift lake we're going to talk about in just a minute, which is actually the biggest in the world. So I wanted to ask...
the biggest lake in the world?
Yes.
Ooh.
I want to ask the chat. I'm just curious if anyone in the chat knows. See if, keep an eye on it with me. What's the biggest lake in the world? And if you're watching the replay, just try and answer out loud. See if you know this one.
Well, Anna in the chat is mentioning something, the Caspian Sea.
Then here we get to an interesting question. It can be kind of tricky to define if a lake is connected to the ocean, but just barely. Do we call it a lake or not? Like the Mediterranean Sea. The Mediterranean Sea is connected to the ocean, but that path where you go from the Mediterranean Lake to Mediterranean Ocean into the Atlantic Ocean, it's kind of narrow. Could we call that a river? Could we call the Mediterranean Ocean a lake?
It's just too connected. So I don't think that would make any sense to call the Mediterranean Sea a lake.
And typically the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, we don't call lakes, although you could make the argument that they are. So
they're not actually connected to the ocean.
By rivers.
Well, rivers, but almost all lakes are connected by rivers.
Yeah.
Isn't that right?
The Caspian Sea, let's go to page 101. Some do call this a sea, and others the world's largest lake. It kind of depends on our definition. The Caspian Sea is salty, and it is really big by volume, but its maximum depth is also pretty large, 100 meters deep. And these are three salty lakes here: the Caspian Sea, the Great Salt Lake, and the Dead Sea. So these do not.
And those are their actual shapes?
Yes. Yeah, but they don't have cartoon faces, obviously.
Obviously.
Yes. And the Great Salt Lake, the poor thing, has a railroad across the middle. So the salinity up top is very different than the salinity down water because the waters don't mix. Now, up here at the top, though, if we go by the traditional, not counting the Caspian Sea, the biggest lake in the world by far is Lake Baikal.
Okay, I've heard of this. Is in Russia?
This is in Russia. And it is a rift lake. So that means there is tectonic activity at the bottom of the lake where the two continental plates are spreading and going apart. And that is what makes it so incredibly deep. The average depth is more than 2,000 feet.
And is it getting deeper over time?
And it is getting deeper over time. Now, the volume of Lake Baikal is so big, it's kind of hard for us to picture. So I want to just do a quick thinking exercise. This sort of shows you, all of Lake Superior. If we were just to kind of represent it by a little parabola, this volume is the entire all of Lake Superior.
So it's pretty big. So that's why we drew it wide.
Yeah.
But it's not nearly as full of water.
But Lake Baikal, you could drain all of Lake Superior and fill it several times. And the Amazon River, which we talked about last time, the Amazon River is discharging more than 100,000 bathtub fulls of water every single second into the ocean. It's a huge amount of water. But if entire Lake Baikal were drained and it was empty, and if somehow you could magically take the Amazon River discharge and have it dump into Lake Baikal, guess how long it would take to fill it up?
A week?
3.5 years.
Oh!
And the amount of water coming out of the Amazon is enormous.
Well, yeah, the Amazon's during certain times of the year is like 30 miles wide, just massive. So you're saying that Lake Baikal is so big that all that water would take 3 years to fill it up.
3 years to fill it up. So if you're looking at a map and you look at Lake Baikal on the map, it doesn't look quite as big as the Great Lakes because it's not quite as wide, but it is so deep that it actually has about 20% of the entire world's surface freshwater.
Oh, man.
So water that we can drink, about 20% of the water that's liquid and that is on our surface in lakes and rivers, 20% of it is in Lake Baikal.
That is big.
That's really big. Now let's talk real quick about zones of the lake back on page 100, and then we've got some fun fact or fiction. So if you are in a lake, there are 3 things that really make a big difference to you if you are an animal. One is, do I have ground? Do I have earth to grow in? The other one is there sunlight or not?
True.
And if we have sunlight, but there's no ground really, then this is the limnetic portion. And fish will be swimming out here and there will be algae floating around, but you're not going to see plants out in this zone because the water moves around too much and there's no ground for them to grow in and get nutrients from.
Oh, okay. So the littoral zone is the zone where there's actually earth.
Yes,
So
there's
ground to grow into.
Earth and sunlight. And then if you go down deep and it gets dark, you're in the profundal zone.
Okay, I've never heard of littoral, limnetic, or profundal before today. So this is educational. Wow.
Now, here's the thing. The limnetic zone and the profundal zone, sometimes in certain lakes, they will mix because in the summertime, this is warm and this stays cold. But in the wintertime, if you have ice form up here, this layer gets colder. And then in the spring, there's mixing where the cold water sinks and that not quite as cold, but still cold water comes up and you get nutrients and the whole lake turns over. But there are certain lakes where that doesn't happen. And now, Math Dad, we have a couple fact or fiction for you to see if you can tell if these strange, crazy lakes are real or not.
Okay, I'm ready.
So is there a tropical island here in the world that is full of migrating jellyfish that live over the top of a cloudy layer of purple bacteria? That's kind of oddly specific, but what do you think? Is that true or false?
No, you're making stuff up here because jellyfish can't possibly migrate over an island because they don't even have bones. So they almost collapse in the water. So
you're saying jellyfish could have never made it into a lake?
Yeah, well, they're migrating. I assumed that meant they're moving. Yeah, in theory, maybe some jellyfish could have gotten there, but then they can't migrate and they're stuck. Now, this is false.
You should have looked at the chat, Math Dad, because Rebecca, you and Hart and so many other people, Olivia and Isaac and Great White, were all saying true, and they were correct.
How is this true?
Okay, this is one of the coolest lakes in the world. This is Jellyfish Lake on the island of Palau in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And here's where we get kind of this interesting question about what's a lake and what's not, too, because there are some cracks in the limestone that connect Lake Palau, Jellyfish Lake, out to the ocean, but they're not big enough that the water is the same. Like you can't really swim, from Lake Palau underground out to the ocean. There are a few little tunnels, but the salt content and the way the water works in Jellyfish Lake is quite a bit different. And there are...
So lakes can be saltwater.
Yes. So this is a salty lake. And in the top layer, you have these jellyfish, and they cross the lake back and forth each day following the sun because they have algae growing inside them that are photosynthetic. And so they migrate and turn around so that their algae get the most sunlight. And then at night, they dive down to this layer. And I kid you not, it is a purple layer of algae that's photosynthetic and eats up all the oxygen. And below that algae layer, you have no oxygen. Here's a little frowny face because below the layer, there's no oxygen and there's a lot of hydrogen sulfide, which is incredibly poisonous. So you've got a layer that does not mix with the water above it at all, and this purple cloudy algae layer kind of in between.
Whoa.
Isn't that bizarre?
That is bizarre.
Arlene asked, do those jellyfish sting you? These can sting just a little bit, but this person here who is snorkeling, it's safe to snorkel as long as you stay in the top layer. So these jellyfish, it says some people, if they touch around your mouth, you might feel a little bit of a stinging sensation, but if they touch on your other skin that's not as sensitive, you probably wouldn't even notice. They're pretty safe jellyfish. But if you go down to the hydrogen sulfide layer, that would be deadly. So
Yes.
no oxygen, poisonous gases in the water. Bad idea.
Stay away.
Yep, the jellyfish don't even go down there. They just go to that purple layer. But doesn't that seem like something out of a science fiction novel?
Yeah, it does. And I'm not sure whether I would be nervous there or not. But yeah,
So
really cool.
that's one crazy lake story. And here is another crazy lake story that might be true, might be not. It's up to you to guess.
Mm-hmm.
The deepest lake in Louisiana currently is over 200 feet deep, Lake Peigneur. It used to be freshwater, but now it's salty. Is that true or false? And you can see it's not right next to the ocean. It's a ways inland.
Okay, so it's so far inland that maybe people would, like the ocean can't get there, but they're dumping bags of salt maybe? I don't, that's kind of weird. All right, chat, I'm seeing true, false, true. Oh no, I'm seeing a little of everything. I'm gonna go, I'll say true this time.
All right, let's go to our big camera for just a second, because I have to tell you what is one of the craziest stories I have ever heard, and it is 100% true.
Oh.
And before I start, I'm going to tell you, because it sounds like it's going to be a scary story where a lot of people die. Nobody died when this happened. And now here's the story.
Good.
Lake Peigneur was only 10 feet deep. That's not very deep. And it had quite a bit of fish, and there were people out fishing on the lake one day in 1980. And there was also an oil rig out drilling for oil, because they said, you know what? There are a couple little veins where we could have some oil down here. Let's drill down and see what we find. But way below the lake, more than 1,000 feet below the lake, there was a salt mine. And what we think happened, although it's hard to say because everything was destroyed in the aftermath, what we think happened is that this drill went down and punctured the salt mine.
Oh.
And all of a sudden, the drill rig started to tip. And the people who were on the drill rig said, uh-oh, evacuate. And they got in boats and went away from the drill rig. And then in the salt mine, water was coming in, and the miners really heroically all said, evacuate. And they had practiced their evacuation drills so many times, everyone got out of the salt mine. And then the excitement really started.
What happened?
A huge whirlpool opened up, and the entire lake drained within a matter of hours into a hole that was more than 1,000 feet deep.
So it's like a bathtub drain. It just starts going down.
There were 11 barges, full-size barges on the lake, and they all got sucked into the whirlpool. It happened like as it was getting started. It was slow enough, and people could see this vortex forming. Everybody was able to get off the lake. There were several fishermen, and you can find online, you can find interviews with the fishermen as they're talking about seeing these barges start to circle and how everyone was fleeing for their lives.
Run away!
And the whirlpool was so deep and so big. There's a canal that connects Lake Peigneur to the ocean. The canal actually reversed direction, and the ocean water was coming over the canal and dropping into this huge hole. And for several days, it was the tallest waterfall in the state of Louisiana, going the opposite direction that the canal used to go.
Ocean water coming in.
Yes.
Oh, man.
And after several days of a huge whirlpool, all of the salt down there had been filled up with water. And then
the whole mine.
Yep. And 3 of the barges popped back up like corks. They reappeared on the surface of the lake. The oil rig never resurfaced, and who knows where it is now. And the lake is now about 200 feet deep. So sediment and mud kind of settled and filled in a lot of that depth.
And it's now a salt
And
lake.
it's now salty. It's not quite as salty as the ocean because there are freshwater rivers coming into it still, but now it is a brackish or a salty lake instead of freshwater.
I thought you were going to tell me it was salty because of the salt mine, but the ocean itself actually came all the way in hundreds of miles.
I think that the salt mine probably helped to make it salty as well. But here, let's look real quick at this little diagram showing us what happened. So this isn't quite to scale, but you had the drilling mine right here, and here are little pockets of oil that they were trying to hit, but the drill got off track, and you can see the questions mark here. Like, we're not exactly sure because everything was destroyed, but it hit the salt mine. Water started coming in, but then you literally had a vortex of water draining down like that for several days.
Wow.
Crazy, right?
That is crazy.
Sometimes truth is stranger than fiction.
Well, that's amazing. Nobody died because
It
that's a
is.
lot of water moving.
It is. And, kudos to all of the workers who had practiced safety and evacuation drills because that saved lives on that day.
All right.
Now, this one, I'm sure you're going to get right, Math Dad, and I think everyone watching is going to get right true. Is this true or false? Are some lakes saltier than the ocean?
Yes, I happen to know this one's the Dead Sea.
The Dead Sea is 9 times saltier than the ocean, which is incredible. It's so salty, it's almost impossible to swim there. And by swim, I mean like dive under the water. If you try diving under the water, you just pop back up. You float so easily. This person is not even trying to float. They've got a newspaper in both hands, and you can see their knees, their feet, and their head and their shoulders are all above the water because it is so super salty.
Now, we humans usually float on top of water, but not like this. We're barely floating, right?
If it is a regular swimming pool, floating on water takes a lot of work. And if you try to get your feet, your hands, and your head out of the water at the same time, you will fail. Because you can't do that. On the Dead Sea, it is so incredibly salty, 9 times saltier than the ocean, that you can float really easily. And this is why we call it dead too, because the salt concentration is so high, nothing can live in there. So this is salt that just happens to crust rocks around the Dead Sea.
Is that the saltiest lake in the world?
That is the saltiest lake in the world. And it's also really deep. It's almost 1,000 feet deep.
So if somebody comes up to it, could they mistake it for the ocean?
Only if they're from farther away. If they get closer, they'll be able to tell pretty quick that it's way saltier than the ocean. And also it's surrounded by mountains and it's small enough.
So you're not going to have waves.
No, you're going to see mountains on the other side and you'll realize that it's not the ocean.
Okay.
All right, one more fact or fiction. Oh, actually, don't pretend like you didn't see that, Math Dad.
Oh, yeah.
Quick. We're going to go back to the notes now and we're going to do a couple Where in the World mysteries. So we have some Where in the World mysteries that are just a few pages before our notes that we did today on page 98. And there are 3 lakes here. And I want to see, Math Dad, if you can identify which are the lakes. So the one that is probably the easiest
I don't need easy questions, Science Mom.
Is C, because this is the one we were just talking about.
So the Jordan River flows in, but not a single river flows out. 10 times saltier than the ocean. This is a lake without any fish. So it's so salty, fish can't even live in the Dead Sea?
Yeah, there are no fish in this lake. So this one is pretty easy because we look at our pictures, and this was letter C. And what lake has no fish?
The Dead Sea. That's why they call it dead, right?
That one. And that's why in our pictures here, we have no fish living in there. There could be some little bacteria at the very bottom of the lake. There was an article recently about how there are some freshwater springs that make it a little less salty at the very bottom, 1,000 feet below the surface. Some bacteria might live down there. But the top of the lake, it's way too salty.
So I don't know if you guys have ever been to the ocean, but inevitably, if you go out and swim, you're going to get a bit of water in your mouth. And, oh, is it salty and miserable. I cannot imagine 9 times more salty than that. Yeah.
Super salty.
I don't want to swim there.
All right. One more. We're going to have 2 other lake clues before we go to our questions for today.
All right, I'm ready.
A basin that once held lava is now home to salmon and trout. Its crystal blue waters are more than 500 meters deep.
Whoa.
Do you have any idea where that might be?
Well, lava, so I was immediately thinking of Hawaii, but I don't know about any big lakes there. But salmon, I'm thinking Alaska. That's all I've got, Science Mom.
That's all you've got? Hopefully someone in the chat can help Science Math Dad out.
I need some help on this one. Which letter are we reading?
We are reading E, letter E.
Letter E, okay. Once held lava, but now it's home to salmon and trout. 500 meters deep. That is really deep.
It is really deep.
But, I mean, Lake Baikal was really deep, but that's...
Lake Baikal is even deeper.
Yeah.
Lake Baikal does not have salmon, and Lake Baikal was not completely filled with lava. Crater Lake, Kate has got it, and Mimi Grace has got it, and Eleanor has got it.
Nicely done, guys.
Very good. Crater Lake is correct. Now, the reason Crater Lake has salmon...
Where is Crater Lake?
It is in Oregon, in the Cascade Mountains. The reason Crater Lake has salmon is because people said, hey, this water is nice and cold and there are rivers that come in here. I bet salmon would live here. And we transplanted salmon in because people like to fish.
Oh.
So, 300 years ago, there were no salmon in the lake, but there are salmon and trout in the lake now. So let's see, Math Dad, you're one you got and one you didn't get.
I'll get this next one.
Can you get the third one?
Yeah.
The world's oldest lake holds 20% of Earth's fresh water. Geophysicists think it's on its way to becoming an ocean.
Wow. Okay. I happen to know the answer, but only because you already said it, that Lake Baikal had 20% of the world's
That's right.
surface freshwater.
So, but which picture is it? Can you pick a picture?
Oh, well, that's a little bit harder. Well, it's on its way to becoming an ocean. So I'm seeing, I bet it's that one up there.
It is this one right here. So one cool thing about Lake Baikal is that it has its own species of freshwater seal.
Whoa.
This is the only seal that lives in a freshwater lake anywhere in the world. And we don't really quite know how they got there. They've been there for, as long as we have any written records. And they live on this lake that in the wintertime, the ice can get up to 2 meters deep. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah. And so it's on its way to becoming an ocean. You said that it was growing bigger.
It is.
It's
Slowly growing bigger. So in another several million years, perhaps it will go wide enough and long enough that then it will connect to the ocean and become part of the world's oceans.
Cool.
Yep. And kudos to Kunalin, who says they're Nerpa. They're adorable. They are super adorable. And if you're looking at the seal
That's the seal. It's a Nerpa.
Yeah, Nerpa is the kind of the name of the seal. And if it looks really fantastically fat and cute to you, yes, in real life they are that fantastically fat and cute. They are very cute.
Nice.
All right, let's go now to itempool.com/sciencemom/live. If you ever forget the link, it is in the description of the video as well. And we've got some polls. We also happen to have several birthdays today, which is quite exciting. So we want to wish a very happy birthday to Miles today, who turns 7. Happy birthday,
Go Miles.
Happy birthday to Eli from Vermont, who turns 9 today.
Good job, Eli.
And a happy belated birthday to Elizabeth, who turned 10 yesterday.
Double digits.
We hope that you all had and have wonderful birthdays. And now it is time to test your knowledge and see what you have learned about lakes.
For your birthday present, I shall crush you.
That's what he thinks, but it's not going to happen.
All right. Our first question. Which body of water contains 20% of Earth's surface freshwater? Okay, this was a poorly timed question.
They'll definitely get this one.
Okay, they're going to get this one. But, you got to give them an easy one to start off with. It's Monday, after all. So which body of water contains 20% of Earth's surface freshwater?
You will definitely know this by the end of this class. And so if you're ever on Jeopardy and they have like the lakes and rivers question and they ask anything about this lake, you'll just nail it. Let's go ahead and finish and reveal.
All right. And the answer is Lake Baikal.
Lake Baikal is so much bigger than the other lakes of the world. It's kind of, it's like there's not even a close second in terms of fresh water.
So Lake Baikal in Russia.
In Russia. Next question.
All right. What is the name of the deep zone of a lake where no sunlight reaches? The littoral zone, the limnetic zone, the profundal zone? It's one of those. And I definitely didn't know the answer to this before reading Science Mom's notes.
And Kunalin asked good questions about why some lakes are pink. Because some lakes are, and it's usually a certain type of algae. And if the water's kind of has just the right salt concentration, there are pink lakes that flamingos visit, where they'll often bloom and have this pink, and it's because of algae and then the shrimp that eat the algae. And that's why flamingos can be pink or white. If the flamingos are eating the shrimp that eat the algae, that pink dye actually goes to each animal. It turns the shrimp pink, and then it turns the flamingos pink.
But I thought algae was using photosynthesis.
There are different types of photosynthetic algae, and some of them are red, not green.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's cool. All right, the answer is the profundal zone. Nicely done.
Very good. Next one.
The difference between a lake and a reservoir is which of the following? So lakes are bigger than reservoirs, or reservoirs are man-made, or reservoirs can't have fish in them, or reservoirs are filled with salt water.
Is Kaladin asleep?
Oh, his eyes popped open. I think he loves being cradled.
He does. He likes being held.
He just nestles right in.
We did not talk about reservoirs up until this. So this is like a pop quiz question, but it looks like most of the people know it, is what I'm guessing. Let's go ahead and finish and reveal.
All right. Maybe.
Reservoirs are man-made is correct.
They are. So I grew up in Winder, Idaho. We had nearby Winder Reservoir, but also up the road we had Twin Lakes. I always wondered, how come this one's a reservoir and these ones are lakes? And it turns out, okay, they were all reservoirs because they were all man-made. They weren't natural. We had a canal system of water that would bring the water in, store there, and there was even an outlet. And yeah, I just kind of assumed, well, these ones must be natural because they're
called a lake.
Lakes, but they weren't.
A lot of reservoirs are called lakes. So we live next to Lake Mead near Las Vegas. Lake Mead is called a lake, but it used to be just a river. It was just the Colorado River coming through. But then when we built Hoover Dam, when people did that, then the water filled up behind Hoover Dam and created a lake. But really what we should say is a reservoir because it would not be there without the dam.
Yeah. So you might just say reservoirs are lakes that are man-made.
Lakes
would
that are man-made.
Probably be a pretty good
Yep.
summary on that one. All right. What is the world's lowest lake? So the lake in the world with the lowest surface.
The lowest surface in terms of elevation.
So I'm not saying which one goes down the lowest, but which one has the lowest surface elevation-wise. Thank you, Science Mom.
Yep. And then I have a related question that we will answer as soon as the polls for this one come in.
It's a really good question by Eleanor there. Do fish drink water?
Ooh, that is a good question. Eleanor, I would have to do just a little bit of research on that one for you.
Obviously, they need the water somehow, and it's probably just coming in their mouths, but it's such a natural part of what they are. It's kind of like of course, we breathe air. We're living in the air. Yeah. So are they consciously drinking or not?
I'm not sure. I'd have to look into that.
Ooh, so we're getting some interesting answers here. It might have just been a poorly worded question, but really close.
Let's go ahead and finish and reveal.
And they said the Dead Sea.
Dead Sea is correct. The Dead Sea is more than 1,000 feet below sea level. It is the shore of the Dead Sea is officially the lowest elevation of anywhere on Earth.
So if the mountains around were removed, ocean water would actually pour down in because it's so low. It's 1,000 feet below sea level.
Way below sea level. But as to what the lowest lake is, you could actually make an argument that the lowest lakes are at the bottom of the ocean.
That doesn't make sense.
No, here's how it works. You know that there is this phenomenon where fluids that are more dense will sink to the bottom and then regular liquid water will be on top. Well, in the ocean has such great weight and pressure that you can get hypersaline lakes that are even saltier than the Dead Sea at the bottom of the ocean by these vents. And just like deep sea vents will have, tube worms and these cool animals by them, there are just a few that have been discovered so far, but who knows, there may be more because we have not explored most of the bottom of the ocean. But in the Gulf of Mexico, there are some underwater lakes, and it really does look like a lake. You see a shoreline and you see this layer of water that is a different salinity and a different color
than
the water above it, and it is filling a basin. So you could call that a lake, but since it's already underwater, is it a lake or not? Well, hard to say.
All right. That's kind of cool.
Yeah. All right. One more question.
Our last question. True or false? Canada has almost 2 million lakes.
That is a lot of lakes, Math Dad.
It's a crazy number of lakes.
Math Dad wrote the questions this morning, so actually I don't know the answer to this one. So I feel like I should take a guess.
Now I'm wondering if I should have really fact-checked this a little more carefully, but I don't know.
I'm going to guess true because I've seen maps of Canada and there are a lot of million lakes, although 2 million is such a high number. Maybe I'm going to change it to false.
Yeah, that's a lot of lakes.
All right, now I'm just really curious to see what the answer is. Go ahead and reveal, Math Dad. Tell us what the answer is.
All right. True. This was... That's a lot of lakes. But Canada, by the way, is
is big.
It's massive. It's huge, and yeah, crazy number of lakes. We were talking about Minnesota having a lot of lakes, which head up into Canada and
That's right.
keep at least that many.
Land of 1,000 lakes, and then you go up to the land of 2 million lakes.
Yeah. Now, obviously, many of them are not humongous lakes, but that's a lot of lakes.
Very nice. Well, great job, Unbeatable Science kids, on the questions today.
Well, 5 out of 5. A lot of them got.
Yeah. And we are not going to watch all the dances today, Harper, but I will play the one that I see first. So whichever one I see requested first, we will play.
Well, Mindy said 1.4 million lakes is the number that she found looking it up.
Fact checking. So when we can't really round 1.4 up to 2.
Almost 2 million. That's
well, and
on the grand scheme of things.
And this brings up Night Slayer had a good question. What's the difference between a lake and a pond? So traditionally, it's just a matter of size. And, here in Nevada, we would probably call something a lake that other places might call a pond just because we don't have a lot of standing water here. Oh, and first request I saw was for the worm. So the dance today is going to be the worm. Enjoy this victory dance. All right, try a worm.
Ouch.
The last question that we're going to answer is from Remington Wolf. What would happen if someone drank water from the Dead Sea? And the answer is you would get dehydrated even faster than if you drank salt water. But it is so salty, I think you would have a really difficult time even doing just the smallest swallow of Dead Sea water because the salt content is high. Your whole body would be like, no, don't do it.
I don't know, it might be kind of a fun experiment to try. Just get some really salty water that you mix up on your own and see.
Don't drink it.
Yeah, just get a spoonful and
taste a drop.
See, can I even swallow this stuff that's so salty? And you quickly decide that you don't want to. You certainly wouldn't want to. Yeah.
You do not want to throw off the balance of salt that is naturally inside your body. So you need a certain amount of salt per day, but if you get too much, that is not healthy at all. So yes, no, I don't think anyone would intentionally drink salt water, but if you were swimming in the Dead Sea and got a little mouthful, you would be thirsty afterwards. You would really want some fresh water.
So Anna was asking about swamps. Are swamps lakes?
Swamps usually do not have a basin. There will be
just a shallow
area that will either connect to a larger body of water. So can you have a swamp like on the side of a lake? Yes, you can, but it's not going to have a profundal zone, a zone that's deep. It will all be really shallow. And so since the basin is so shallow, we don't really call that a basin. It's more like, a riverbed. Why isn't a river a lake? And well, it's because you've got this running water instead of still water. To be a lake, you should have still water and have an area that is deep enough where you have some darkness. Maybe that's a good way to do the difference between a lake and a pond too. And
the pink lakes aren't acid lakes. You clarified that.
Yes.
You said it was just because of minerals and algae?
Often it's because of algae, although it depends. There are a lot of bizarre lakes in the world.
You mentioned an acid lake. What was an acid lake?
At the top of volcanoes. Sometimes if you have on the top of a volcanic crater, if you have rainwater fill there, you have these gases coming out from the volcano, and they can turn the water bright green or blue or red. And depending on the minerals, there might be enough sulfur in there that the lake will actually be really, really acidic, where if you tried to put a boat in there and paddle across, it might eat out the bottom of the boat.
Ooh.
So volcanic lakes can be dangerous. You wouldn't want to go fishing there. There would be no fish to catch.
Or Isaac's pointing out Yellowstone. We got the geothermal. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. The geysers and the pools in Yellowstone have some incredible water as well. All right, guys, we are out of time. Work hard, grow smart, and we will see you on Wednesday to learn all about glaciers.